Hello and welcome to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
Before we dive into our guest is today, Joe is going to remind us of our show's mission and purpose.
I love it. I can't wait. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And, Searching for Service is a podcast that delves into the transformative world of community service and connection. In the space, we respond to a lot of the shifts that we've been seeing and the way that people serve. And we want to unite people together through a greater cause. Our focus is through the power of Rotary and its clubs, that they're platforms for cause-driven fellowship, inviting both members and non-members to share in its quest. Through inspiring stories and interviews, we aim to spark a movement of meaningful relationships and expanded horizons. And we're excited for all of you to join us on this journey.
Beautifully stated. I love it. All right. So we have yet again another amazing guest on our show today. And her name is Erica Gweyn. Welcome, Erica.
Oh, thank you for having me today.
We are happy to have you. And so I'm just going to share with our listeners quick on what your official title is, and that is the Area Focus Manager for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene, also known as WASH. And this is through Rotary International, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, we're happy to have you on. Really, in this first segment, we enjoy getting to know who we have on as our guest. And so I usually like to start with, where are you joining us from?
I live in Chicago, which is just south of where the Rotary headquarters is located in Evanston, Illinois.
Cool.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
How long have you been there?
Oh, I came to Chicago from Detroit area, actually, about maybe 10 and a half years ago. And that was specifically in order to work for Rotary.
What were you doing before?
Oh, I've worked all over the world and actually within the United States as well, in the public and private sector. So I was a long time ago an ambassadorial scholar, and if you remember that program, and that really helped get me my first, break into the international development world. And lived for about 5 years in Mexico. Also did some work and lived over in Ecuador and in Uganda. And then in the United States here, I came back and worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, doing water resource management as well. All related to water, public health, environment. And I actually even worked in the Great Lakes region here, doing fisheries management as well on Lake Michigan. So I've been popping around the world. And then finally I decided, you know what, I feel like coming back to the Midwest where my family was, and but still keeping my fingers in development, but in a different way.
Well, and it sure makes it, you're very uniquely qualified for the role that you serve within Rotary.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So when was it that you transitioned to your role with Rotary International?
Well, that was about 10 and a half years ago. And it's funny, when I came to Rotary thinking, oh, this will be a 2-year contract and, I'll jump over to whatever country's next. I really knew little about Rotary, even though I had been an ambassadorial scholar. And but I knew that when I got to Rotary and started learning more about who Rotary members are and the diversity there and the potential that Rotary members have in really creating change through service, I was kind of hooked, because I thought, wow, this is really different. This is different than the typical development aid organization that I've worked with in the past. So
that's super cool.
So did you start right away with WASH, or did you have a different role?
No, I've always been in WASH. They hired us in. There's, as you know, there's now 7 areas of focus, right? And but there's 6 area focus managers that have been hired over the last 10 and a half years. So we each represent our different sectors, coming from different nationalities, different backgrounds, but all representing our different areas. So
I'm really glad that you brought that up. This is kind of bringing everything into focus for me. You mentioned the ambassadorial scholarship, right?
Yeah.
So I have been a part of Rotary for a year and a half now.
Okay.
So I'm a wee baby when it comes to being a Rotarian.
Yeah.
So I know nothing about that. How long ago when did they?
Yeah, that's probably aging me, mentioning for those that are listening that recognize the Ambassadorial Scholar Program. That was before we essentially declared our areas of focus, or what we call future vision. That Ambassadorial Scholar Program allowed me to do research overseas, which was in Mexico. And like I said, it opened a lot of my foot in the door. So that program actually still exists, but as global grants. And so we call them global grant scholars now. Yeah.
Got it.
Cool.
There you go. There's the connection.
And I didn't want that to be like the sole focus. It was a question of mine.
No,
but the reason that I asked that was because truly you kind of helped me focus in. I understand that there's the 7 areas of focus, but now I understand that there's the area managers for each of the areas of focus too.
Yeah.
So
and they're uniquely qualified in the sense that they've spent extensive time in those fields. So it's not just, some of the things that, we've seen in other interviews is that, just people say yes to posts, like, hey, we have this opportunity. It's more, you have to be uniquely qualified to manage it, which makes total sense. I have one question. Who got the fuzzy end of the popsicle stick and has 2 areas of focus that they manage?
Well, I bet you could guess. They're very related to each other. It's disease prevention and treatment and maternal and child health.
Yeah, I guess that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Otherwise, you'd have to find somebody that has very scholarly interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
What's been your favorite thing that you've worked on since becoming, being in your role? Like what's been the favorite initiative that you've worked on?
I mean, so my role, instead of being the implementer where I came from, I am now serving to provide support to our Rotary members to really be able to engage effectively, because we can engage with our hearts, but not necessarily does that equate to effective outcomes, And so Rotary wants to become smarter with its investments. We also want to be, we value Rotary members' time and their expertise. The people that I am now working for, which are, you all, are absolutely amazing, because they are leaders in their field. They're leaders in civil society. They're leaders in their communities. There's so much diversity and expertise that surrounds me. It's a matter of now trying to organize that and kind of channel it for good. So the old way of doing things, we recognized, is not creating the impact that we think it was, or that we thought it was. And that's really hard to admit because we put so much time and energy. Mm-hmm. So things need to change, and change is hard to do. So my goal is to help Rotarians be comfortable with that change. So some of the things that I've really never expected to work in with Rotary members were helping them to really recognize that their role within water and sanitation is not necessarily direct implementation of a borehole or a
Yeah.
rainwater harvesting system. And then we walk away and say, all right, everybody has water and sanitation. But actually, what we have found is the most important role for Rotary members is their voices, their advocacy, their opportunity to influence. And the people that Rotary works with oftentimes include community members that are neglected or not heard as well.
Mhm.
And so they really bring the issues of the most vulnerable populations out there right to the forefront in our communities. And so we call that advocacy, even though oftentimes we think of advocacy as lobbying, right? But that's so limited of a view. And so Rotary really has an amazing leadership and responsibility for development in their own communities. And that's where I really work with them in water and sanitation. And then it's not as tangible. So you don't see the beautiful water coming out of the ground all the time. Of course, we do those projects for sure. But the fruitful part for me is when we start seeing, when I see Rotary members, investing in people in their community. So when you invest in people, and like they did with me, they invested in me to put me, in as an ambassadorial scholar, and look at the fruits ended up being tenfold versus if they had invested only in a borehole. So that to me,
none of that would have been possible without water.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll dive further into what exactly WASH means and does in our next segment, Erica. You're listening to Searching for Service. We'll see you in the next segment. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
As a reminder, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms, and
you can find us by looking up Searching for Service on all the platforms. We also have a YouTube channel too, Chad, don't we?
Yep, you can find us by searching for Service on there. And we love 5-star reviews, likes, and shares. So thank you for tuning in.
Ooh, nice job, guys.
Right?
Appreciate it.
Smooth as silk right
That
there.
Very good. If you are tuning in for the first time, we are in our second segment with Erica Gweyn. She's the Area Focus Manager for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene, also known as WASH, through Rotary International. We got to know Erica in our last segment. So if you've got a moment, you should tune back to that and take a listen. But in this next segment, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to dive deeper into WASH and what exactly that means. And so let's start off with when WASH was implemented.
Well, at the Rotary Foundation, it was recognized as one of the top areas of focus that Rotarians were interested in working in. And I'll be really honest with you, there's a little bit of trivia, but if you look back at Rotary's history, and we saw what was the very first service project that Paul Harris did, and it was the institution of public toilets in Chicago. So so the real answer to that question goes all the way back to the early 1900s, but in terms of the area of focus for water, sanitation, hygiene, that was about 10 and a half years ago.
Okay. Well, and I mean, that area makes so much sense. We've had so many people on that we've talked about, water projects. We've talked about, just how transformative clean water is to communities, just access to clean water and sanitation, and just how it transforms the entire community. It touches everybody and everything and allows that upward trajectory. So it makes sense that it's one of the areas of focus because it seems to have the most impact.
Yeah, and it's global. I mean, oftentimes we think of, rural Africa or rural Southeast Asia with the quote unquote challenges. But here in the United States, we still have over 1 million people that don't have access to sanitation, which means that they are still going in their backyard. And these are places like, and you can actually look at these beautiful maps that we have online, but you can see that's like Appalachia, our indigenous tribes and cultures that exist. So Navajo Nation is a big one. The Apache tribe. There is also a lot in the Deep South along the Louisiana border and Mississippi border. And, these are, some people live off the grid for fun, but we're talking about those that really don't have access. And as a result, that really impacts their health, and that impacts their education and their livelihoods. So it's universal. It's a universal challenge.
Yeah. And because it's so universal and kind of macro, for our listeners, really help maybe outline some of like the 3 or 4 initiatives that, WASH is really focusing on now, because it is so big, right? So maybe that's a great way to focus in and target our conversation a little bit more. So talk a little bit more about a few of the initiatives that we have.
Well, I'm excited to say that we've really taken some feedback from our members and on the direction going forward. And we've really decided and mapped out a new strategy that's helping us to focus. Like you said, we can't be everything to everybody. And what we realize is that our strong suit is really in WASH, what we call WASH in schools and WASH in healthcare facilities. So why are these 2 areas really important? Because we're talking about, again, vulnerable populations, children, as well as especially young girls, and healthcare facilities, because we still have 1 in every healthcare facility that has inadequate sanitation and water services. So that means when, for example, in certain parts of the world, when a woman goes into labor, can you imagine going to a clinic where there's no water and no sanitation? So,
yikes.
And that's profound, if you can imagine. So, and with schools, what we also found is that the impact is much larger in magnitude of what we can do through our service. We have young girls that are staying home 5 days every month because of their period and menses, right? And if you don't have good sanitation services, girls are not coming to school. And then they end up lagging behind in education compared to boys. And even some parts of the world that I've been to, I have seen direct violence happening in the school grounds because of the taboo that's associated with blood and a woman's menses. So, there's a lot of things that can be addressed by putting in our basic human right. And it is a human right. It's been declared a human right by the United Nations recently. So this month, by the way, is World Toilet Day is what we say.
World Toilet.
Yeah. Yes. So, bring out the cake and candles and make sure you recognize it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, but no, I'm really passionate about it. So I'm serious.
No, really, I celebrate it. But
good on you. I mean, I would hope, as an area manager focusing in this sector, you should. Yeah.
But I think it is actually a funny commentary that, we don't celebrate it. And it's because we take it for granted, right? Like versus say a community that just got sanitation services. I bet you that they're more than willing to celebrate that great holiday.
Yeah. And I have another great story. Actually, I just got back from Uganda. And so we also are focusing on areas, what we call kind of priority countries for Rotary in the future, priority WASH countries. And I would say actually the Navajo Nation in the United States is being considered to be one of those sovereign countries. So we are looking at that and what that means is that we really want to advocate and put our resources allocated to these areas because our Rotarians are so organized and they have such a big heart. And in northern Uganda, I want to share a quick one about specifically, there was a gentleman, a Rotary member I met. His name was Peter. And Peter, when he was a young boy, northern Uganda, if you might have recalled, there was huge conflict with the border of Sudan. And there was a lot of boy soldiers that were taken. The armies from the north would come into northern Uganda, raid the villages looking for children, capture the children, brainwash them, and make them into child soldiers. And Peter, this Rotary member, was a child soldier. And he, his story is profound. And I was privileged to have him share this story with me. And he told me that he was able to escape, and he had a choice, even though he had gone through and done some really horrific things. He had a choice when he got out, and he decided that he wanted to serve his community, to bring its resiliency back, because his community had been broken because of this awful conflict. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing he started is, okay, where can I start? Really, where can I start? And all he remembers is that the only safe places during that time when they were raiding all the communities for children was that the community members would gather in the school, the one school, and the clinic that was there. And they would stay there, and they were safe as long as they were in those institutions for some reason. And they didn't have any water. They didn't have sanitation at that time. But it was when the people left those institutions for looking for food and water when they were put in danger. And unfortunately, that was his case. So he decided, what I'm going to do, and he wanted to create a rehabilitation program, bringing people that were child soldiers that were now adults and have gone through a lot of trauma, and bringing them into service. Sometimes some of them became Rotarians, but some of them didn't. But it didn't matter to him. He was a Rotary member, and he decided to work in water and sanitation specifically for schools and healthcare facilities. To return the favor for those institutions, those safe spaces, which they should be all universally, right?
Yeah.
And providing the water and sanitation just helped to elevate it even more. And he did that by bringing people in that experienced pain, and even inflicted pain, and brought them into service. So that's that to me touched me so much, because it really showed me the power of even an individual, and then also what an individual can do with the backing of an entire network of Rotarians all around the world behind him.
So, such a powerful story of kind of what's behind some of the inspiration for focusing on, the schools and the healthcare facilities, not to mention just impact, right? Seems to be a little bit more controlled areas where impact is just greater. A lot of people go to them, and I really like that. One of the things that you've identified as well is birth mortality. That's all of that, and then facilitating education amongst, let's make sure the kids are born, and then let's make sure that they're educated and healthy. Yeah. So I think that's a really powerful focus.
Yeah. What a great story too, Erica. So we want more stories like that. We love it. It's so good. Thank you for tuning in to Searching for Service. We'll see you in the next segment. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson. We'll be back.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
As a reminder, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms, and
you can find us by looking up Searching for Service on all of those platforms. We do 5-star reviews, likes, shares. I don't know. Follows, all the stuff.
And we also have a YouTube channel as well.
Yep, you can find us the same way.
Perfect. Go ahead and dive in, Jack.
And you get to see our beautiful faces.
So you told us the story, about your recent trip into Uganda. where else are the areas right now that are being focused in on, and how are you supporting the clubs to really get involved with that? Because I know some club members around here, I think we're just in Uganda on a trip. Talk about how that interaction works and how you support them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this is definitely not an exclusive list. It's really just watching the grassroots demand bubble up. But, I definitely am putting most of my attention right now in Uganda, Ghana, Honduras, Haiti right now, and the Philippines. Those are in India. So that's already a pretty big portfolio. But, and of course, we have projects and efforts going in 200 countries in the world. So, but unfortunately, there's only one of me right now. So it's really about tapping into that expertise pool that I said exists within Rotary. And the beautiful thing about WASH is that you don't have to be a civil engineer or an environmental engineer or a public health specialist, which is kind of what people think. Oh, I'm not an engineer. But actually, the strongest things that we need within water and sanitation are people with finance degrees or accounting experience, people that are social workers, because they have skill sets that are what we've identified as like the key things within our projects in water and sanitation that need help for sustainability. So it's not enough to just give access to water and sanitation, but we want to give sustainable access, and sustainable means like forever. So, it does no one good to be drinking dirty water or to go to a place where, a toilet facility and have it completely plugged up and not working. We've all had that experience. So it's really about looking at the two big things in sustainability that we work with Rotarians is really financial management, which, it's not that sexy sounding, but absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. And then behavior change, which means like, behavior change is so interesting. I'll go into that for a second. So how many of us have smoked in the past, or perhaps like me, I have a little bit of an extra tire around the middle of my waist. And, it's really trying to, better. You shouldn't be having that sip of alcohol, or, you shouldn't be eating that third scoop of ice cream, or maybe third pint of ice cream, but you still do it, right? So the behavior change, right. So the behavior change in WASH that we're really trying to instill are things like washing your hands at the proper time. I mean, the one blessing of, this is kind of odd to say, but the one blessing of COVID was that it really put an emphasis on masks and washing your hands, right? Mm-hmm. Now, whether that's stuck with everybody after the pandemic was over, that's another story. And it just shows you the difficulty of changing our behaviors.
I can 100% testify that has not stuck with a large portion of the population.
Oh, I know.
I've seen it firsthand. People walking into the bathroom after going, I'm like, what? I can't. Anyways, I digress.
I hear you in the Rotary headquarters. I'm sorry to throw my colleagues under the bus sometimes when I go in there and I watch them walk right past the hand washing stations. But
all of you Rotary International individuals that may be listening to this, you probably know who you are and been called.
Wow, just targeted. Jeez.
I'm a promoter of clean sanitation and hand washing. Let's do it.
Erica, you mentioned a lot about, like, just to put this back on the rails. Usually it's me being the one that like throws it off the rails. So me putting it back on the rails. Yeah. So you talked about the sustainability, and we've had a lot of people on this show. And do you have a lot of interaction with like World Vision and some of the other organizations that we partner with to create that sustainability and kind of the correct methodology to get things done?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because the key for really having impact, especially with Rotary, is working with partners. Is that the challenge worldwide is way too big for
Mhm.
any one entity, even Bill and Melinda Gates, right?
Yeah.
So working with these partners like World Vision and Water Aid, Water for People, there's a plethora of them, is really critical. But what's even more important, and this is one thing I also coach in, is around partnership selection, I would say. Just like any relationship, is you need to be judicious. We need to be judicious, and we need to find partners that have common core values
Mhm.
and recognize our value as well as we recognizing their value. Because if not, then we become donors for their work, and they're underestimating really the power of Rotary. And sometimes it just takes us to be able to educate others more about really who we are and what our potential is.
Yeah.
So one thing with UNICEF that, for example, UNICEF told me once when I was in Guatemala, they said, Erica, when we go into government, the government is like, UNICEF is here. We know exactly what they're going to say because they say the same thing every time, But when Rotary goes in, even with the same message, it's heard a lot differently. And that is because they are civil society. They are the actual members and leaders that UNICEF or the government should be supporting, should be promoting development. So Rotary really has a really pivotal role, that advocacy role I was talking about beforehand.
Yeah.
That brings up, so as people are listening, how can they get involved, from, the small and on upwards, to the listeners and Rotarians and non-Rotarians in this work?
Yeah. Well, I would say first thing is, your community the best. So the first thing is look in your own backyard and really get to understand, if anything, learn a little bit more about what the water and sanitation issues are in your own community. Here in the Great Lakes region, where I live, we have lots of issues going on with water and sanitation, especially in the city of Chicago, issues with lead in our water supplies and infrastructure failing and wastewater going directly still into the Great Lakes. So that's really the first key.
Yeah.
Is looking in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And then if you want to think about also thinking about the global mindset, there are so many individuals that are I call brothers and sisters in Rotary that are working across the globe, working in water and sanitation projects. You can reach out either directly to me or the Rotary Foundation to kind of get linked in with those folks, learn a little bit more. But I can almost guarantee you, almost in every district, there is a water and sanitation international project going on. So connect with them, support them, even if you are an accountant, because now from today's podcast, hopefully, that you have a role to play and very valuable. So it's a great area to work in, and you can impact many other areas, like I said, healthcare, education, environment, directly from working in water and sanitation.
Love it.
That makes sense. And you talk about at home, we see it here in the Twin Cities with some of the chemicals that just some reports. So I think it's also good, as you mentioned, to think locally as you think you pass that. And we've had guests on that are, not specialized in that. I mean, a number that have gone to different areas. So that really makes sense and connects there.
Yeah. Guatemala was one of them. Uganda.
Uganda's definitely been
like
the big
hot place for many of our guests who have been on the podcast.
Yeah.
Some of our club members were also.
And if you ever want to come with me, I always love having company.
How often do you go on travel to work on
I usually go, well, there was a time it was every other month, and that became too much with my family.
A lot of traveling.
Yeah. So now it's down to around every 3 to 4 months. But if you're interested, I'm always definitely please come along. That's I had PDG Lloyd Campbell. Yep, he came along with me to Uganda.
You're listening to the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's 100% listening to the show right now.
Do you do you go with groups, or do you go kind of figure out what the need is and then help groups from different
question.
areas go?
Yeah,
Or
great
is
question.
it all connected?
I don't organize like group trips and whatnot because that's too overwhelming for 1.2 million Rotarians across the globe. But I do focus on supporting our what I call my teams, my Rotary members in the country that we're trying to serve. And as I start to get to know you all, so now that I know you all, I will definitely be reaching out and inviting you for our next trip. And if you have a sincere interest, definitely come along.
Very cool.
Sounds
Love that.
good. Don't go anywhere. We have one more segment left here with Erica. You're listening to Searching for Service. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson. We'll be back.
Hello and welcome back to Searching for Service, brought to you by Rotary District 5950 and 5960. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
As a reminder, you can find us on your favorite podcast platforms.
And you can find us by searching for service.
Looking up Searching for Service.
Ooh,
We love
so
it.
close.
Five gold stars,
Yeah.
likes, comments, all the 9 yards.
Yep.
We do like those 5-star reviews, though. Those really help the podcast.
Yes.
Oh, they became gold stars now, I heard.
Yeah. The only kind of stars I like.
If you're tuning in and you just heard the other voice, that is Erica Gweyn. She's the area focus manager for water, sanitation, and hygiene, also known as WASH, through Rotary International. And I'm gonna toss the baton over to Joe because it sounds like he's got a great little segue.
Well, we really like this fourth segment because we talk about the future. And, something that's really been a major focus of this show is finding creative ways to build membership and build new clubs and new types of clubs, specifically around cause base. And can you see a future where there are cause-based clubs around the WASH program? And what do you think that looks like?
Great question. There already are clubs that are cause-based. So we have e-clubs now, which are relatively newish. And we have several of those that are specific for water, sanitation, and hygiene. I think one's based out of Colorado. Another one is based out of New Zealand. And the third that I'm familiar is out of South Africa. So that's exciting. And and I think also with membership, we have to remember, like, how do we keep our members engaged? And I always think about that because, I'm not even going to say I'm a young professional anymore, not anymore, but as a middle life professional, why would I join Rotary? And it's really to be active with not only in my community, but also to be a part of that global network, which makes us so special and so very different than really any other membership organization. So really getting people engaged in projects, both locally and globally, is, I think, the best way to not only bring new members in, but retain members. And especially with international service, you start to develop friends from all over the world. And when you go to the international convention or something of that sort, you don't feel, like a lone reed in the wind. You end up saying, oh my gosh, I know now I've met people from here and here. And, it's incredible. It really is incredible. And there's not a lot of opportunities to do that.
I think that it puts life into perspective too. That's one of the things that has been really helpful and beneficial for us doing this podcast and being hosts for it, is that we get such incredible perspective in regards to what happens outside of our bubble, is what I like to say, because as humans, we like to just focus on what's happening the here and now and just within our own lives. Whereas if you have the connectivity, like you're talking about through Rotary and that global connection, you start to see some of the bigger things that we otherwise, to the point that we made earlier, take for granted.
Well, and it's been so great with e-clubs and things like that, that we're kind of breaking down those natural barriers, like especially around geography, right? Like, I mean, typically Rotary clubs have been built around the communities that you live in. Well, it's been so like a breath of fresh air to have these clubs where, you know, if you just care about something, there's other people. And I think we'll find the 3 clubs that Erica mentioned, and we will link them in the show page for those that are interested in knowing more about WASH, or maybe getting involved with a WASH e-club. And I think that would be a really great place to start if, you know, if you're not able to join a club locally.
There's also the rags too. I didn't mention them, but they're a key mover and shaker, I think, and within Rotary is, we call them rags, which is such an odd word, but it's a Rotary action group. And so we have the WASH rag, ironically.
WASH rag.
Wow, WASH rag. You like that?
My gosh.
We also have we call the MHM rag, which is I don't even know how you would pronounce that, but it's a menstrual hygiene management rag. So both of those are extremely active. They have their own boards. They even provide sources of funding for local and international projects. But most importantly, it just plugs you into that network so that, you know, you find that network of individuals, similar to fellowships, right? Of people that have similar interests with you. And, you know, again, you don't have to be a WASH professional. In fact, most of them are not.
You know, as we were talking in the future, so where's in the short term, you know, where would you like to see this program continue on, and really long term with WASH?
Yeah.
What would be your goals and vision for it?
Well, can I dream?
That's
the whole point of this.
We love it.
Okay. My dream is that we eradicate polio worldwide, but recognizing that polio is really, it has been perpetuated and spread via fecal matter in the environment, recognizing the importance of WASH as being our next big area to pursue in the future as a corporate program, I guess you could call it. Sure. And really inspiring so many Rotarians around the world to collectively target water and sanitation so that we really have like a measurable impact that people are going to say, wow, look at this. Like Rotary Civil Society, we can't keep them out of the picture anymore. Like it's silly if we don't think of Rotary every time we go into a community. That would be my dream.
I love it.
That's really great.
Really great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and it kind of, I think piggybacking on the polio thing, that makes a lot of sense too, because I think a lot of people that are non-Rotarians do associate that impact strictly with polio, and then you have to explain, oh, it does a lot more than that.
Yeah,
it really connects there, I think. As you talk about that vision. How about in the short term? You know, what are the big things that you're trying to work on in the next year or 2 years as you work towards that dream that I think is amazing?
So this for me is really getting Rotary members in whatever country you're in to really be mobilized and coordinated together. So we've typically in the past done our own thing at the club level, which is okay, but now really to make the movement that we need to make and that I believe that our communities deserved, we really need to be working together as one. Yeah. And so I would like to see within the next year, really collective efforts going on in specific areas of the world to take the lead and show what can be done when we work together like we did with polio.
Sure. Very, very good.
Well, thank you so much for like keeping this so focused. Like, I mean, it's such a big, like, I'm like, man, we can go everywhere with this.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2.
There you go. And a part 3 and a part 4.
Yeah. There's always going to be ongoing informative pieces that you can share, right? So yeah there could be a round 2 and a round 3. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that, this is kind of the opportunity of the show to share, like, I know for us on our end in our show is we're really trying to recognize and build Rotary in its new ways as well. I mean, just being a podcast in itself is already kind of being creative and appealing to a new demographic of people that, have historically been underserved with Rotary. And then, we obviously want to drive membership, club creation, and, people being really excited about what Rotary does. And it's so nice to have somebody from Rotary International at a very high level that can explain why all of these programs happen, why all of this, like why the focus is what it is.
Why it's so important.
Why it's so important. And obviously being like somebody that is a trained professional in the area, like I can't even underline that enough of going, that's so uniquely great, because it's not necessarily like how we approach Rotary elsewhere. Like it's all volunteer and everybody kind of steps in, but like we've gotten these 6-7 pillars so dialed in with professionals and real people that know what they're talking about and are passionate about it, obviously. And it's just been a really nice breath of fresh air for us.
Yeah, we got about 30 seconds to a minute left. What are the last things or parting things you'd like our listeners to know?
Keep the topic alive. What you guys are doing right now is so vital, because nobody wants to really talk about, maybe water, but nobody really wants to talk about feces, and nobody wants to talk about women's period or menses. But these are all really critical things. So by the fact that we're around a table today talking about it, I hope that clubs talk about this podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, go back to your club, bring it up as a speaking topic, and keep the topic alive, because if we sweep it under the rug, it doesn't get addressed.
Wow, that's great.
That was really great.
Poop piles up and stinks.
That's right. Keep saying poop. That makes me feel good.
Well, thank you so much, Erica, for joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge. We appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. I'm Kelly Kirk.
I'm Joe Kirk.
And I'm Chad Larson.
As a reminder, it's time to stop searching
and start serving.
We'll see you next time.